The woman hit the ground before she hit the door. By the time Caleb Morrow pulled it open, a woman in a torn wedding dress was face down on his porch. One shoe was missing. Blood ran from the cut above her left eyebrow. The horse she'd ridden stood behind her, too exhausted to move.
Ma'am?
He had not heard a knock in over 2 years.
Ma'am?
Help me.
Can you hear me?
Please, don't send me back.
The words were barely there, more air than voice, but they were words. Caleb looked past her at the empty plain. There was no wagon, no rider, and no one else coming. He crouched down. His hand hovered over her shoulder, but didn't touch. He hadn't touched another person since the funeral, since he'd carried his wife's coffin and set it in the ground behind the barn. Then he slid one arm under her shoulders and the other under her knees and lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her inside and laid her on the cot by the stove. The cabin was dark and spare, one room, one window, one chair. A man's life stripped down to function. He pulled the blanket over her. He set water on the stove to boil and sat in the chair across the room, watching her breathe.
Don't touch me.
He did not know her name. He did not know where she'd come from. He did not know why she was wearing a wedding dress 40 miles from the nearest church. He did not know whose blood that was, hers or someone else's. But he knew the look. He'd seen it before in the mirror, 2 years ago. The look of someone who had run out of places to go. When she woke again, it was only long enough to give him her name.
Do you understand?
Clara, please.
Then her eyes closed again. It took another full day before she could sit up without the room tilting sideways. The fever came that first night. Caleb did what he knew how to do. He kept the fire going. He pressed a damp cloth to her forehead. He boiled broth from the last of the dried beef. He said nothing, because he had nothing to say. By the second morning, Clara was sitting up, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring at the cabin like she was trying to understand how she'd gotten there.
Where am I?
Morrow Ranch, about 8 miles south of Elk Creek.
Elk Creek.
She repeated it as though it meant something. Then she shook her head.
I don't know where that is.
Most people don't.
Silence. He poured her a cup of water and set it on the edge of the cot without getting too close. She noticed that the distance he kept.
You live here alone?
I do.
For how long?
Long enough.
She looked at the cabin again. The single chair, the shelf with 3 books and a tin cup, the window with no curtain. This wasn't a man living. This was a man waiting for something to be over.
I need to leave.
You can barely stand.
That doesn't change the fact that I need to leave.
Where would you go?
She didn't answer, because there was no answer to give. She repeated it as though it meant something. Then she shook her head.
I don't know where that is.
Most people don't.
Silence. He poured her a cup of water and set it on the edge of the cot without getting too close. She noticed that the distance he kept.
You live here alone?
I do.
For how long?
Long enough?
She looked at the cabin again. The single chair. The shelf with 3 books and a tin cup. The window with no curtain. This wasn't a man living. This was a man waiting for something to be over.
I need to leave.
You can barely stand.
That doesn't change the fact that I need to leave.
Where would you go?
She didn't answer, because there was no answer to give. The town she'd come from was 3 days' ride east, and every mile of that road led back to the man she'd run from. The dress told the story she couldn't bring herself to speak. A wedding that had started and not finished. A ceremony interrupted, not by objection but by bruise. Caleb didn't ask, not yet. He was a man who understood that some truths need silence before they can be spoken. So he went outside and split wood, and he let her sit with the quiet. Clara watched him through the window. He moved with the economy of someone who'd learned to do everything alone. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The axe rose and fell in a rhythm that felt almost meditative. She noticed his hands were rough, his shoulders broad but thin, as though the work kept him strong but the solitude kept him lean. She looked down at the dress. The fabric was ruined. She could still feel the moment she'd torn it, reaching for the saddle, pulling herself onto the horse while the shouting behind her grew louder. The lace had caught on the stirrup and ripped from knee to ankle. She hadn't cared. She would have ridden naked through the desert if it meant getting away from Franklin Ayers. Franklin. Even the name made her stomach tighten. He was a man of standing in Cutter Falls, owned the general store, the feed lot, and half the land around the creek. He was 43 years old, well-dressed and patient in the way that a cat is patient with a mouse it's already cornered. Clara's father had owed him money, a great deal of money, and Franklin had offered a solution that everyone in town called generous. Marriage, a fresh start, a debt erased.
You don't have to tell me what happened. Not yet.
Caleb's voice came from outside, through the window. He hadn't turned around. Clara realized she'd been speaking out loud, whispering really the name, the memory, the weight of it leaking out of her like water through cracked wood. She pressed her hands flat against her knees and steadied herself, but the memory wouldn't stop. What no one mentioned, what no one wanted to mention, was the way Franklin's first wife had died. Fell down the stairs, they said. In a house with no stairs. Clara had agreed to the wedding because she had no choice. Her father was dead by then, dead of drink and regret, in that order, and she had nothing. No money, no family, no skill that anyone would pay for. Franklin had been courteous during the courtship. He'd brought flowers. He'd spoken softly. He'd waited. But on the morning of the wedding, in the room behind the church where she was meant to dress, he'd come in uninvited. He'd closed the door. And when she'd asked him to leave, his hand had found her wrist, and his voice had changed. He'd gripped her wrist and leaned in close, his voice low and flat. "You belong to me now," he said. "Best you understand that before we walk out there." The bruise didn't show under the sleeve, but Clara felt it all through the ceremony. Through the vows she couldn't bring herself to finish. When the Reverend asked her to say "I do," her mouth opened and nothing came out. Franklin's grip on her arm tightened. She felt the room contract around her, and something in her, some last flicker of the girl she'd been before. Her father drank everything away, that flicker caught fire. She pulled her arm free, she turned, and she ran. Through the church doors, past the staring faces, down the steps and into the street where Franklin's own horse stood tied to the post, saddled and waiting, because Franklin Ayers was a man who planned everything. She took it, let him explain that to the town. 3 days later, she collapsed on Caleb Morrow's porch. Caleb came back inside with an armload of wood. He stacked it by the stove without looking at her.
There's a shirt and trousers in the trunk. They were my wife's. They'll be too big, but they're better than what you've got on.
Your wife?
She's dead.
He said it flat. Not cold, flat. Like a road that's been traveled so many times there's no shape left in it.
I'm sorry.
There's soap by the basin if you want to wash.
He went back outside. Clara stood slowly, holding the edge of the cot. Her legs trembled. She opened the trunk and found the clothes. A simple cotton shirt, brown trousers patched at the knee, a pair of wool socks. Underneath them, folded carefully, was a woman's shawl, blue with small white flowers embroidered along the edge. Someone had loved this shawl. Someone had folded it with care even after the person who wore it was gone. Clara lifted it to her face. It smelled like cedar and dust and something faintly sweet, like lavender that had dried years ago. She put it back. She changed into the clothes, washed her face and braided her hair with fingers that still shook. When Caleb came back in for the evening, he looked at her once, standing by the window in his dead wife's clothes, and his jaw tightened. But he didn't say anything. He set 2 plates on the table and divided the food evenly. They ate in silence. The fire cracked and settled. Outside, the wind pushed against the cabin walls like something testing for weakness.
I'll work for my keep, until I'm strong enough to go.
Go where?
I'll figure that out,
You keep saying that.
because I will.
He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Not at the injuries or the ruined dress or the exhaustion, but at her, the stubbornness in her mouth, the steadiness in her eyes, even though her hands were still trembling.
There's fence needs mending on the south pasture. Can you work a post hole digger?
I can learn.
And she did. Over the next 3 weeks, Clara Ellison learned to do things she had never imagined doing. She dug post holes until her palms blistered, and the blisters broke, and the skin underneath toughened into something new. She hauled water from the creek in buckets that pulled her shoulders out of line. She fed the chickens, mucked the small stable, patched the roof of the lean-to where the mule sheltered. Caleb taught her without warmth but without cruelty. He showed her once, then expected her to remember. The first time she tried the post-hole digger, she drove it into the ground at the wrong angle, and the handle snapped back and caught her across the chin. She sat in the dirt, eyes watering, jaw throbbing, and waited for him to say something pitying. He didn't. He picked up the digger, showed her the correct angle, and handed it back.
Keep your weight forward.
That was all. And somehow that was exactly right. The worst day was the 4th day, when a section of fence on the east side collapsed under its own rot, and the 3 remaining cattle wandered a mile into open prairie. Clara spent 4 hours on foot chasing them back while Caleb rode the mule, in a wide arc to cut them off. By the time they had the animals penned, Clara's legs were shaking and her lungs burned, and the sun had baked the skin on her neck raw. She sat on the porch steps and put her head in her hands. Caleb brought her water without being asked. He set it beside her and leaned against the porch post, looking out at the land that seemed to fight them at every turn.
Some days are just about not quitting.
Is that wisdom or a warning?
Both.
She almost laughed. It surprised her, the impulse to laugh. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt it. Certainly not in Cutter Falls, where every smile she'd worn was a performance calculated to keep Franklin satisfied. If you're hearing this from some kitchen table or dark road tonight, tell me where you are and what hour it is there. Leave a like too, if you have it to spare. Small kindnesses travel farther than people think. On the 6th morning, Clara found Caleb's pistol on the shelf above the basin. She checked the chamber the way she'd seen Franklin do it. Empty. Caleb saw the motion from the doorway and crossed the room in 3 strides.
Put that down.
Then load it.
He held out his hand. She didn't move.
If he finds me here, I won't stand in a corner and wait for him to take me.
You don't know how to use it.
Then teach me.
The room went still. Caleb's jaw tightened.
A gun in shaky hands is just another way to die.
So is trusting men to save you.
That landed. She saw it land. Something flared in his eyes. Anger first, then the recognition that her anger had earned its place. At dawn the next day, he took her behind the barn with the pistol, 6 cartridges, and no patience to spare. He showed her how to plant her feet, how to keep her wrist locked, how to breathe before the trigger break. The first shot jolted all the way up her arm and went nowhere near. The can balanced on the fence post. The second tore dirt 2 feet to the left. The third hit tin.
Again.
She hit it twice more before he took the pistol back.
Last resort. You hear me?
I hear you.
What she didn't say was that nobody had ever handed her power without expecting payment for it. On the 10th day, Clara found a garden. Or what had been a garden. A small rectangle of fenced earth behind the cabin. Overgrown with weeds, but still bearing the skeleton of careful rows. Bean poles still stood, gray and splintered. A trellis for climbing roses had collapsed into the sage. She didn't ask about it. She started weeding before dawn the next morning, pulling out dead growth by the handful, clearing the rows. When Caleb came out and saw what she was doing, he stopped. She braced for anger. Instead, he went to the barn, came back with a hoe, and took the far end of the plot without a word. They worked side by side for 2 hours. Their hands moved in the same dirt Ruth's hands had once shaped. Neither said her name. Neither needed to. It was there, in the garden, that their hands brushed for the first time. Clara reached for the watering pail at the same moment Caleb was setting it down. Their fingers met over the handle, a collision so small it barely qualified as contact. But the effect was immediate. Caleb pulled back as if he'd touched something hot. Clara's breath caught. He picked up the hoe and went back to work too quickly. Clara poured the water with hands that trembled slightly, and the whole morning felt different after that narrower, somehow charged. That night she was mending one of his shirts by lamplight when she looked up and found him watching her from the chair. The lamplight made his eyes darker, and there was something in them she hadn't seen before. Not desire exactly, more like grief making room.
What?
Nothing. Just Ruth used to sit where you're sitting.
Clara held the needle still.
Should I move?
No. Stay where you are.
His voice was rough. He looked away toward the fire, and Clara understood that she was witnessing something. Private, a man's heart reopening against his will, like a wound that heals. From the inside out, painfully, without permission. One evening, a month after she'd arrived, a storm came in fast from the west. The sky turned the color of a bruise, and the wind went from steady to violent in the time it took to get the mule inside. Caleb was in the barn securing the door when the first bolt of lightning hit a cottonwood 200 yards out. The crack was enormous, like the sky had broken. Clara was at the cabin door, watching, and she saw him flinch. Not at the lightning itself, but at the sound. He stood frozen for a full second, his back to her, and she saw his shoulders lock. Then the wind slammed the cabin door open hard enough to rattle the hinges. Rain came in sideways. Caleb crossed the room fast, shoved the door shut, and dropped the bar into place. A second gust sent water through the roof seam over the cot.
Away from the window.
She moved, but the floorboards were slick. Her foot slid. Caleb caught her before she hit the stove. One arm went around her waist, the other braced her shoulder, and for one startled instant their bodies were pressed together in the dark, roaring center of that storm. Neither of them let go quickly enough to pretend it was nothing. The leak spread. Caleb dragged the cot clear, pulled the only dry blanket from the trunk, and settled on the floor by the stove with Clara beside him because there was nowhere else to go. The blanket covered both of them from shoulder to ankle. Through it, she could feel the heat of him. The storm battered the cabin walls. The fire hissed and snapped. Later, when the thunder rolled farther off but the rain still hammered the roof, she asked the question she'd been circling for weeks.
What happened to your wife?
He didn't answer for a long time. His shoulder was still touching hers beneath the blanket.
Fever. Winter before last. Took her in 6 days.
You were here when it happened?
Where else would I be?
Thank you. I mean, was there anyone? A doctor?
Nearest doctor's in Elk Creek. I rode there and back in a day. By the time I got him here, she was already gone.
His voice was steady, but Clara saw his hand, resting on his knee close into a fist and open again.
What was her name?
Ruth?
He said it like a prayer. Like the word itself was sacred and using it cost him something.
She must have been strong to live out here.
She was stronger than me. That's the truth of it.
Clara pulled the blanket tighter. The storm shook the walls. For a moment, in the flash of lightning through the window, she saw his face clearly, the lines around his eyes, the beard he didn't bother trimming. the way grief had carved itself into the architecture of his features, like wind carves rock.
I'm sorry, I'm wearing her clothes.
Don't be. She'd have wanted someone to use them.
That was the first night something shifted. Not dramatically, not with a declaration or a touch, just a hairline crack in the wall Caleb had built around himself. Clara heard it in the way he said she'd have wanted. Present tense slipping into past, past slipping into future. A man beginning to consider that the world might continue, even though the person he'd built it with was gone. But the world had other plans for both of them. It was a Tuesday 5 weeks after Clara's arrival when the rider appeared on the ridge. Caleb saw him first, a dark shape against the morning sky, motionless on horseback. He didn't come closer. He just sat there, watching.
Get inside.
What is it?
Inside. Now.
His voice was different. Not louder, harder. Clara went inside, and through the window she watched Caleb walk toward the barn, where the rifle hung above the door. He took it down, checked the load, and stood on the porch with the gun resting in the crook of his arm, not aimed, just present. The rider watched for another minute. Then he turned his horse and disappeared over the ridge.
Who was that?
Don't know. Could be anyone.
But his eyes stayed on the ridge for the rest of the morning. And that night, for the first time, he didn't go to bed. He sat in the chair by the window with the rifle across his knees and watched the dark. Clara lay on the cot, not sleeping, listening to the small sounds of the night. Coyotes, wind, the creak of the chair as Caleb shifted. She knew what he was thinking, because she was thinking it too. Franklin Ayers was not a man who let things go. She'd taken his horse. She'd humiliated him in front of the entire town. And Franklin was rich enough and angry enough to send someone looking.
It might be nothing.
Might be.
But you don't think so.
He didn't answer. The silence answered for him. The next 3 days were tense in a way the cabin had never been. Caleb worked closer to the house, kept the rifle within arm's reach, scanned the horizon every few minutes. Clara caught herself doing the same, her body remembering a kind of vigilance she'd learned in Cutter Falls, where Franklin's eyes were everywhere. On the 3rd day, Caleb came in from the barn and set a small bundle on the table.
There's enough dried food in there for 4 days. Water, canteen, matches. The pistol is loaded. 6 rounds.
What are you doing?
If someone comes and I'm not here, you take the mule and ride north. Follow the creek upstream. There's a settlement called Harper's Ford about 3 days out. Ask for a woman named Bess Greer. She runs the boarding house. Tell her Caleb sent you.
Caleb.
I need you to listen. Can you do that?
She stood very still. She could feel her pulse in her throat. He was standing 2 feet away from her, the closest he'd been since the day he'd carried her inside. She could see the frayed collar of his shirt, the scar on his right hand, the way his chest rose and fell with controlled breath.
I'm not leaving.
This isn't your fight.
It's not yours either. I brought this here. If anyone should leave, it's me.
You can barely handle a horse at full ride. You'd be caught in a day.
Then teach me.
He stared at her. And for the first time since she'd known him, something crossed his face that wasn't grief or caution or distance. It was surprise. Genuine surprise, as though it had not occurred to him that someone might choose to stay.
You don't owe me anything.
I know.
Neither of them moved. The 2 feet between them felt like inches. Clara could hear him breathing. She could see the pulse at the base of his throat. And she understood, with a clarity that startled her, that this man, this silent, broken, stubborn man had become the first safe place she'd ever known. Not because he was strong, but because he'd never once tried to own her. The moment broke when the mule kicked the side of the barn and Caleb turned toward the sound. But something had changed in the geometry of their arrangement. They both felt it. He taught her to ride properly that afternoon. Not the desperate clinging she'd done fleeing Cutter Falls, but the real thing. Balance, control, communication with the animal through pressure and release. They used the mule first because the mule was patient and slow and didn't care about dignity. Caleb walked alongside, one hand on the bridle, talking more than he'd talked in any single hour since she'd arrived.
Don't grip with your knees. You'll tire out in a mile. Sit deep. Let your hips follow.
Clara tried. The mule plodded in a lazy circle around the yard, and she tried to let her body relax into the movement. It was harder than it sounded. Every instinct told her to clench, to hold, to brace against the possibility of falling.
You're fighting it. You're fighting everything.
That's how I've survived this long.
He stopped the mule, looked up at her. The sun was behind her, and she couldn't read his expression, but his voice was different when he spoke, softer, almost careful.
Not everything needs fighting, Clara.
Her name. He'd said her name, not ma'am, not nothing. Her name, spoken in that low, rough voice, and it sounded like it belonged there, like he'd been saying it for years. She felt the heat rise in her face and blamed the sun. She fell twice during the lesson. The first time, she landed on her hip and the pain shot through her like a rifle crack. She lay in the dust, staring at the sky, and waited for the world to stop spinning. Caleb's face appeared above her, worried, though he was trying not to show it.
Anything broken?
Just my pride.
The second time she fell harder came off the side when the horse she'd graduated to, the one she'd stolen from Cutter Falls, now rested and spirited, spooked at a rabbit. She hit the ground with her shoulder and rolled. And before she could get her bearings, Caleb was there. He offered his hand to pull her up. She took it. His grip was firm and rough, and he let go the instant she was standing. But not before she felt the tremor in his fingers. And not before she noticed that his hand lingered, just barely, a fraction of a second, before releasing hers, as though he was making himself let go. As though letting go was the harder thing. That night, for the first time, he spoke more than a few words at once. He told her about Ruth, how they'd met at a church social in Missouri, how she'd laughed at something he said and he'd spent 3 weeks trying to figure out what it was. How they'd come west because land was cheap and ambition was high. And how the first winter had nearly killed them both.
She used to sing while she worked. Hymns, mostly. Couldn't carry a tune to save her life, but she sang anyway. Drove me crazy at first. Then I stopped noticing. Then she was gone, and the silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard.
Clara was sitting on the floor near the stove, her back against the wall opposite his. The firelight caught the sharp line of his jaw and softened it.
You loved her very much.
I loved her the only way I know how. Completely, stupidly. Without any of the good sense God supposedly gave me.
He looked at Clara, and for a moment the wall behind his eyes came down entirely. She saw what was underneath, not emptiness, but tenderness so vast it frightened him.
I don't know if I can do that again.
Nobody's asking you to.
But they both knew that wasn't entirely true. A week later, Franklin Ayers rode up to the cabin himself. He came at midday, in full sun, with 2 hired men flanking him. He was dressed in town clothes. Clean coat, polished boots, hat tilted at the angle of a man who believes he's arrived. Caleb was on the porch. The rifle was leaning against the railing. Clara was inside, but she could see everything through the window. Franklin's thin smile, the way his gloved hands held the reins like he was posing for a portrait. Franklin tipped his hat and said he was looking for something that belonged to him.
Nothing here belongs to you.
Franklin's tone didn't change. He described a woman, his wife. He called her, who'd run off 6 weeks ago in a fit of hysteria. Stolen his horse, too. He'd been told she may have come this way.
You were told wrong.
Franklin's smile didn't waver. He looked past Caleb toward the cabin, and Clara shrank from the window. Her heart was hammering. Her hands gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. Franklin asked his name. Caleb gave it. Franklin nodded slowly, as though filing it away. Then he leaned forward in the saddle and spoke with the easy patience of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. The woman was his by law and by God, he said. He had papers. He had patience, but not infinite patience.
She's not your wife? She never finished the vows. I'm not a lawyer, but I know that much.
Franklin's smile disappeared. For a moment, the mask slipped, and Clara saw the man underneath, the one whose first wife had fallen downstairs that didn't exist. Franklin straightened in the saddle. 3 days, he said. 3 days to produce her. After that, he'd come back with the sheriff, and he wouldn't be as polite. He turned his horse and rode back toward the ridge, his 2 men following. Caleb didn't move until they were out of sight. Then he went inside. Clara was standing by the stove, shaking. Not crying, she was past crying. Shaking with the kind of anger that lives underneath fear, the kind that only shows itself when you've been afraid for so long that something in you finally breaks.
He'll come back.
I know.
The sheriff won't help. Franklin owns half the county.
I know that too.
Then what do we do?
Caleb set the rifle on the table between them. He looked at her, and his face held something she hadn't seen before: determination. Not the grim kind of a man preparing for a fight, but the steady kind of a man who's decided what matters.
We get married.
The words landed in the cabin like a stone in still water. Clara stared at him.
What?
If you're my wife, he has no claim. The vows weren't finished. You said so yourself. There's no marriage. But if there's a new one, legal and witnessed, he's got nothing. He can bring the sheriff, the governor, and the whole damn territory. You beat Clara Morrow, and that'd be the end of it.
You don't... That's not Caleb. You can't marry someone just to solve a problem.
Why not? People do it every day.
Because it wouldn't be real.
He looked at her for a long time. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, the mule brayed.
Maybe not yet.
3 words. Clara felt every one of them land in her chest like a key turning, in a lock she'd forgotten she had.
You don't even know me.
I know you dug fence posts for 3 weeks with blistered hands and never complained. I know you learned to split wood in a day. I know you didn't run when that rider appeared on the ridge, even though running is what you're best at. And I know that when you look at Ruth's shawl, you fold it back the same careful way I do. That's enough to start with.
Clara sat down. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore, not from weakness this time, but from something else. Something she hadn't felt since before her father died, before Franklin, before everything that had stripped her world down to survival. She felt seen, not wanted, not needed, not claimed, seen.
If we do this, it's my choice. Not a rescue. Not a transaction. My choice.
That's the only way I'd want it.
They rode to Harper's Ford the next morning. Caleb drove the wagon. Clara sat beside him on the bench, wearing Ruth's blue shawl over her shoulders because the morning was cold and because Caleb had offered it without a word, just held it out as she was climbing up. And the gesture said everything his mouth couldn't. The road was rough enough that their shoulders knocked together every few minutes. Neither apologized for it. Caleb kept his eyes on the road, but Clara caught him glancing at her twice. Quick looks, almost furtive, as though he was checking that she was still there, that she hadn't changed her mind.
Are you nervous?
About what?
Getting married. Again.
I was nervous the first time because I was afraid I'd say the wrong thing. This time I'm nervous because I'm afraid I won't say enough.
Clara looked at him, at the profile of his face against the morning. Light. The way his hands held the reins with quiet competence. The set of his shoulders that was beginning, just beginning, to release a tension she suspected had been there for 2 years.
You could practice.
Practice what?
Saying enough.
He glanced at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, Caleb Morrow smiled. Not a big smile, barely a crack in the stone of his face, but it was there, and it changed everything. His whole face shifted. The lines around his eyes softened. The hard set, Of his jaw relaxed, and for one moment she saw the man he must have been before Ruth died. A man capable of joy. A man worth knowing.
You're a difficult woman, Clara Ellison.
Good. You could use some difficulty.
They stopped at midday by a creek to water the horse and eat the cold biscuits Clara had made that morning. They sat on the bank, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, and watched the water move over the stones with the kind of ceaseless patience that water has and people don't.
I should tell you something. Before we do this,
All right?
after Ruth died, I thought about walking into the prairie and not coming back. More than once. I want you to know that. Not because I want pity, but because if we're going to do this, you should know who you're standing next to.
Clara was quiet for a long time. The creek ran on. A hawk circled overhead, riding a thermal that carried it in slow, patient spirals.
Franklin hit me 3 times before the wedding. Once on the wrist, once on the shoulder, once across the face. Each time he apologized afterward. Each time I told myself it was the last time. I want you to know that too. Not because I want pity, because you should know that I chose this. I chose you. And I need you to understand what that means, coming from someone who's been too afraid to choose anything for a very long time.
Caleb looked at her. His eyes were bright in the midday sun, and she saw something move in them. Not sympathy, which she would have hated, but recognition. The kind of recognition that only comes between people who have both stood at the edge of something dark and stepped back.
We should go. Still a ways to ride.
He stood and offered his hand to help her up from the bank. This time, when she took it, neither of them let go right away. They stood there for a second, hand in hand, by a creek in the middle of nowhere, and the moment was so small and so enormous that neither of them tried to name it. Bess Greer in Harper's Ford turned out to be a wide, weathered woman with silver hair and arms like a blacksmith's. She took one look at Caleb, said, "Well, I'll be damned," and pulled him into a hug that he endured with the stiffness of a fence post. Then her eyes moved to Clara, to Ruth's clothes on someone new, and she held the look for a long second before nodding. "I'm not judging," she said. "I'm observing. There's a difference. Come inside, both of you." Over coffee in Bess's kitchen, they explained. Not everything. Clara kept the details of Franklin sparse and factual, but enough. Bess listened without interrupting, her hands wrapped around her cup, her eyes moving between them with the sharp attention of someone who's spent decades reading people the way others read books. When they'd finished, Bess set her cup down and said they wanted Reverend Tate. Fair, fast, and not the kind to ask questions a man didn't want to answer.
Can he do it today?
Bess smiled. She could have him there in an hour, she said, if she asked him right. And so it happened, in the parlor of Bess Greer's boarding house. With the smell of coffee and cedar and old wood, Clara Ellison became Clara Morrow. The Reverend was brief. The witnesses were Bess and her hired man, a boy of 16 named Thomas who looked terrified of the whole proceeding. When the moment came for the vows, Caleb spoke them clearly, without hesitation, looking at Clara the entire time. And Clara, who had failed to speak these same words 6 weeks ago, in a church full of people, said "I do" in a voice that didn't shake. They signed the paper. It was done. On the ride home, the wagon rattling over the same rough road, Clara held the marriage certificate in her lap and looked at it. Her name in ink, his name beside it. A line connecting them that hadn't existed that morning.
Caleb, thank you.
Don't thank me. This was your choice. You said so.
I know, but you made it possible, and that's worth thanking.
He nodded. His eyes stayed on the road, but his hand, the one not holding the reins, moved from his knee to the bench between them. Not reaching for her, just resting there, closer than before. Clara looked at his hand. The rough knuckles, the scar, the calluses. She thought about what it would mean to take that hand. Not as a rescue, not as a transaction, but as a beginning. A choice made freely by a woman who'd spent her whole life having choices made for her. She placed her hand on the bench beside his, not touching, but close enough that they could both feel the warmth. The miles passed in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than the one Caleb had been living in for 2 years. This silence had someone else in it. Franklin came back 9 days later. He brought the sheriff, a tired-looking man named Polk, who rode with the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. They arrived at midday, and this time Clara was standing on the porch beside Caleb. Franklin's eyes found her immediately. His voice went sharp as he told the sheriff that was the woman, his wife.
She's my wife. Has been for 9 days.
He held out the certificate. Sheriff Polk took it, read it slowly, and looked up. The paper appeared to be in order, he said. Franklin's face darkened. The paper was worthless, he insisted. She'd been promised to him. There'd been a ceremony. The sheriff cut him off. Had she completed the vows? Franklin stammered. There had been complications. She was confused, hysterical. The sheriff asked again, slower this time, as if speaking to a child. Did she say, "I do"? Silence. Franklin's jaw worked. His gloved hands gripped the reins so tight the leather creaked. She had not, he admitted. But the intent. The sheriff shook his head. Then there was no marriage, and this document said there was one now to Mr. Morrow. He didn't see what business they had here. Franklin tried once more the horse. She'd stolen his horse. Caleb reached into his coat and produced a fold of bills.
$30. That's more than the animal is worth, and you know it.
The sheriff looked at Franklin, waiting. Franklin didn't reach for the money. He sat very still in the saddle, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something quiet, the kind of quiet that's worse than shouting. He wasn't talking to the sheriff anymore. He was talking to Caleb. He said he knew this land, knew who held the water rights upstream, knew what happened to small ranches when the creek ran dry in August, knew how hard it was to get supplies when the only general store for 40 miles decided not to sell to you. The sheriff shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable. That sounded like a threat, he said. Franklin smiled. Just facts, he said. Just the way things work out here. Polk looked at Franklin. Franklin looked at Clara. And Clara looked back at him, straight at him for the first time without fear. She was wearing a dead woman's shawl and a living man's name. And she was standing on a porch that had caught her when she fell.
I'm not going back, Franklin.
He leaned forward in the saddle and told her she'd regret this.
I've regretted plenty of things. This won't be one of them.
Something moved across Franklin's face. Not anger, exactly. Something worse. The recognition that he had lost the legal fight. But the other kind of fight. The slow, grinding kind that money makes possible, that one he could still wage. He took the $30. He turned his horse. He rode away. And the 2 hired men followed. And the dust settled, and the prairie was quiet again. Sheriff Polk tipped his hat, said he hoped he wouldn't have to ride out here again. But before he left, he looked at Caleb and added, quietly, that Franklin Ayers was not a man who forgot. He said it like an apology.
We'll manage.
They watched him go, and when the last rider was a speck on the horizon, Clara didn't feel the clean release she'd expected. The legal threat was gone. But what Franklin had said about the water, the supplies, the slow strangulation of a life built on land, that was a different kind of danger. The kind that doesn't arrive on horseback. The kind that comes with the dry season.
He meant it. About the creek.
I know.
What do we do?
We dig a well. If he closes the store, I'll haul from Harper's Ford. If he chokes one road, we take another.
He said it simply, like it was nothing. Like digging 30 feet through rock and clay was just another chore. But Clara heard what was underneath. He was choosing to stay, choosing to fight, not with a rifle, but with a shovel and the kind of stubbornness that outlasts money. She exhaled, and the exhale turned into something between a laugh and a sob, and her legs buckled slightly. Caleb caught her arm. His hand wrapped around her elbow, firm and warm, and he held her upright. This time he didn't let go.
You don't have to keep rescuing me.
Clara,
He said her name like it hurt him a little.
this stopped being rescue a while ago.
Then what is it?
His eyes met hers. Franklin's dust was still in the air. The sheriff had barely reached the road. Everything that should have made this impossible was standing right there around them.
It's me waking up and looking for you before I look for the weather. It's me teaching you the pistol and the horse and every hard thing on this ranch because I can't bear the thought of this place swallowing you. It's me hearing him threaten you and knowing I'd rather lose the land than lose you.
Clara stared at him. Her whole body went still.
I married you to keep him from taking you. I stayed your husband because I love you.
She kissed him before fear could get there first. It wasn't delicate. It wasn't practiced. It was the kiss of a woman who had run 3 days in a torn dress and finally reached the one place she meant to stay. Caleb made a rough, startled sound against her mouth, and then his hand came up to her face, careful for only half a second before care gave way to hunger and relief, and something so long denied it felt almost like grief. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard.
I love you too.
The words seemed to steady her as much as him. For a moment the ranch, the threat, the whole hard world beyond the porch fell away. There was only the fact of them, chosen, spoken, irreversible. That evening, they sat on the porch as the sun dropped behind the mountains. The world was quieter than either of them trusted, but it was theirs for the night.
I went to the grave today while you were in the garden.
I know. I saw you.
I told Ruth about you.
Clara turned to look at him. His face was in profile, lit by the last of the sun, and she could see the effort it took him to keep going.
I told her I wasn't replacing her, that nobody could, but that someone came to my door, and I carried her inside, and somewhere, between the storm and the waiting and all this trouble, I started wanting to live in this house again.
She would have understood that.
I think so too.
He took her hand first this time. They sat there until the stars came out, planning where the well would go, and whether the soil near the cottonwood might hold enough water to break Franklin's grip for good. And when they finally went inside, Caleb moved the chair away from the window and set it by the table. He didn't sit in it to keep watch. He sat in it to eat supper with his wife. If you stayed with them all the way to the stars, I'm obliged to you for it. Stories like this ask for patience, and sometimes patience is another name for hope. Out on land that hard, hope begins with small things. A chair moved back to the table, a hand taken first, a mark in the dirt where a well might be. Whether the coming winter would be kind to Clara and Caleb, neither of them could know yet. But for the first time, they would be meeting it together.